Thank you. Just so that I get a feel for the audience here, I'm pleased to see the size of this Sierra Club chapter's range. You're all over the place. And so you've got lots of programs going on at different locations, so I want to thank you for coming to Martin County for this. But indeed, to find out where you all are from and what your interest is that drew you to this meeting about the Loxa-Lucie, just let me get a show of hands. How many people are from Martin County? Okay, the majority of you. Okay, well that's great. And have you heard of the Loxa-Lucie? Hands up. Okay, that's great. And for those of you who have come from further distances, you came down Bridge Road, and along that road you probably saw our signs, the Loxa-Lucie Headwaters signs. So that's kind of our biggest way of reaching out to people to tell them what we're all about. So that was not the question of the day. I am going to ask that question now and let you be thinking about it, because the question of the day is, how many threatened and endangered species are there within this Loxa-Lucie Headwaters project area? Just think about it, and I'm going to try to remember, before I give you the answer on the slide, to take that show of hands and some estimates. So indeed, the Loxa-Lucie project has been going on for a couple of years, and so this is sort of an update for those of you who have heard the presentation or know about it, because there are lots of interesting things going on. And I did see, as we were getting started, Jeffrey Smith came into the room. Jeffrey is back in the back. Just wave if you would. He was the photographer for this picture right here, which is the essence of what we're trying to do. That picture was taken east of I-95, right along the Bridge Road corridor. And it shows, in a word, what headwaters are. You know, a lot of people think about kayaking down the Loxahatchee River or on the South Fork of the St. Lucie. And while that's what gets the most amount of attention, headwaters are those kinds of areas that you can't generally go kayaking on. You can't even paddleboard on them. These are the kind of squishy wetland areas that have water during the wet season, and there may be very little water during the dry season. And so that's the essence of what we're going to be talking about there. So just to orient you, the overall project area is from Cove Road on the north to Jonathan Dickinson State Park on the south, mostly east of I-95, although we do kind of get into what's going on west, because there are drainages, waterways that come out of the area west of I-95 and into our watershed. And US 1 is not included, and the sort of urbanized area just on the west side of US 1 is not included. But that's overall the area. And I'm showing Bridge Road there as the only real obstacle to the hydrologic connection between those state park areas. And this is not a new idea. This is a map, if you see my purple circle up there at the top, from 2011. Way back then, people were identifying that we needed to preserve those sorts of areas. But unfortunately, over the last few years, even though it's been on the Florida Forever list, the state has purchased exactly 0 acres. So the conservation groups here in Martin County have been frustrated with that. And we're trying to figure out how we can start getting these properties purchased. And that is sort of the origination for the whole Loxa-Lucie project. Along with that is this environmental sensitivity or environmental values map that was also done a number of years ago. But like other heat map kinds of things, it shows those areas in the brightest color that have the most amount of environmental value and sensitivity. So the long list of criteria on the right is what went into producing that map. But you certainly see within our yellow oval there, those areas that, because of the variety of habitats, some scrub and some wetlands and some open water areas, that's what makes it so valuable overall. This area is also within the Florida Wildlife Corridor. And for those of you who have been tracking that project that has been moving forward over the last number of years, the goal is to, before development comes in and further bisects all the environmentally valuable areas, to protect those corridors that are good for wildlife. Most of that, and the area that gets the most amount of attention, is on the west coast of Florida, but we do have a branch of it coming off the east, and our properties are within that. We're sort of frustrated by that whole process because overall, the portions of the corridor that are getting the most amount of funding are what they call their highest priority, Category 1 and Category 2 areas. And they are specifically for the larger charismatic megafauna, they call it, the panthers and the bears and those sorts of things. And for the most part, we're not in that. But hopefully, they will end up allocating funding through the legislature for the lower priority areas, which do include our area. So just overall, an idea as to one of the other reasons we got into all of this. You will no doubt recall a couple years ago when there was the proposal to put the golf courses in Jonathan Dickinson. And what we were able to make sure happened here is that the state parks have management plans for all of their properties. And so what they were trying to slip by everybody was essentially an amendment, a change to the unit management plan for Jonathan Dickinson that currently doesn't allow that. One of the other aspects of the management plans, though, is that they're also required to identify those properties in the vicinity of each of their state parks that, if possible, they would like to acquire to help them manage their own state parks. So what I've got on this one is, and what that's called is the optimal boundary. And on the left, I've got the optimal boundary for Atlantic Ridge Preserve State Park, which does extend south down to Bridge Road. And then the one on the right is the optimal boundary map for Jonathan Dickinson. And in that one, it's the orange parcels, and you see that they extend north to Bridge Road. So ultimately, the state would like to purchase these properties, and we're just trying to help them do that. And one of the ways to do that is there is, as most of you know, and the Sierra Club lobbies very hard for funding for Florida Forever. There has been a Florida Forever project here that encompasses all the properties within our plan, and it's called the Atlantic Ridge Ecosystem. It's been on the list for years. They haven't acquired any property. Once we got into this, we went up to Tallahassee and we asked, well, what's the problem with this? It's been on the list for years and we've gotten no acres purchased. What can we do to boost our ranking there? And they said, well, you got a couple things against you. Number one is nobody's even been here to the ARC Council, Acquisition and Restoration Council, to tell us that you want us to buy this land. And sure enough, I look back in the records and there hadn't been anybody up there in years. So we're working on that. And related to that, they said, we need to see that there's local support. And that support can come in two different ways. You need to tell us that you want us to buy this. And if possible, you need to provide some funding towards it. Because if you think of our project here, east of I-95 in Southeast Florida, the cost per acre is orders of magnitude higher than it is for lands up in the Panhandle. So we're trying to deal with both of those things. So I'm going to use Atlantic Ridge Ecosystem and the Loxa-Lucie interchangeable, even though our focus right now is on those wetland areas, headwaters areas. Just overall, we don't intend to ever acquire all the properties within there in this boundary. Some of them are already developed or are in other kinds of land uses such that there's no way we would be able to afford them, nor would we likely want them. So it's sort of filling in the jigsaw puzzle of out parcels that are available. And yes, this is one of those pictures that just kind of puts things in perspective. The exit to the south of us there at Indiantown Road, if you've gotten off that exit and you know the maze of eight lanes and turn lanes and everything else, and similarly to the north of us, Cantor Highway is virtually the same sort of thing. We're unique in this area of having a lot of natural lands along the Bridge Road corridor. And so what our project is to do here is to acquire those properties before they get built up with whatever it is, housing developments, more golf courses, strip malls, whatever it would be. So the environment in that area, the ecology is mostly intact. We've got some water quality problems and other things, and we're going to talk about some of those. But this is really for wildlife, for the plants, for the ecological corridor between the state parks, but also for people, because ultimately there's horseback riding in Jonathan Dickinson, there's horseback riding in Atlantic Ridge, there's hiking trails on both of them, and we would like to be able to make that connection so that people can go from one to the other. Many of you acknowledge that you're familiar with this area. How many of you have been to Atlantic Ridge Preserve State Park? Okay, a much smaller subset, but I'm glad that all of you who did go there have gone through kind of a challenge. You know, there's not big state park signs or anything like that. The entrance is tucked off of a backside road. It is a hidden gem. And we're trying to work on hydrologic restoration on that property. But if you haven't been to it, take the extra effort to go in and you'll see a lot of what historic Florida in this area had been. I mentioned the variety of different habitats. We're not going to get into the details of all of them, but overall, the reason that these properties have not been developed is, as many of you probably know, Martin County has the most stringent wetland protection standards in the state of Florida. So not only is the wetland itself protected, but a buffer around each wetland is protected. So as you saw from that first picture when those wetlands were full of water, and then from this picture, the darker signatures are those wetland areas. So if you put that into a preserve and you put a buffer around it, there is proportionally less developable uplands. So it's not to say that it can't be developed, but the profit margin for development is much smaller when you have to not only protect those wetlands, but the Martin County's regulations are that you have to protect them through a permanent process where you will manage those wetlands and preserves for their environmental integrity. That's called a PAMP, a Preserve Area Management Plan. And so ultimately, if some of these properties get developed, the owners will have to commit to that. So it just hasn't happened yet. And while you see all those for sale signs along Bridge Road, the reason they're for sale often is that land speculators have bought them hoping that they could put their thousands of homes in there. And then they get to the reality of what it's like to develop in Martin County, and they see that they're not going to make the fortune that they thought they would, and ultimately the property then goes up for sale. So if it has a for sale sign on it, we want to buy it. We're going to talk a little bit about water quality. And indeed, this is a picture that I took a number of years ago of some kids on the South Fork doing their own Huck Finn sort of adventure. You could do that back in 2004. But unfortunately, this is the situation that we have been dealing with more recently. Water's polluted to one extent or another for a variety of reasons. And for those of you who have been dealing with just the whole water quality mess in Southeast Florida, you know what's going on here, whether it's the discharges from Lake Okeechobee or the discharges from our own internal basins. There are a variety of things that are causing challenges to water quality in our area. And that's part of what we're trying to do. If we can acquire these lands right now, get the cattle off of them and the other things that are causing those water problems, that's what we need to do. Just to give you an idea of how we needed to focus down in, we looked at the different contributory watersheds within the South Fork, and the green one there is showing where our project is. So that's the largest basin in the area. And other than Lake Okeechobee, which through the SERP project, they're trying to, and LOSM, they're trying to deal with the water quality situations there. Other than that, we're sort of in control of our own destiny. And so that's why we're trying to do these water quality improvements. If you need to look at it in graphic terms, for those of you here locally, the Florida Oceanographic Society does volunteer water quality monitoring. They go out, the volunteers go out every week, and they publish this sort of a map. And so we monitor that, and unfortunately, this is sort of representative of even when Lake Okeechobee is not discharging, the part where our project is what's called the Winding South Fork. And you see in the red there, the conditions when I happened to pull this map were destructive. You know, it's definitely got problems. Similarly, for those of you down further south and are more familiar with the Loxahatchee River and the challenges that that river system has through essentially saltwater intrusion, saltwater is getting further and further up in the Loxahatchee River in the wild and scenic portion of the river. And so my picture on the right there shows that decades-old cypress tree that has died, no doubt because of saltwater intrusion. And instead you see the mangroves that have crept in that area that used to be in more of a freshwater floodplain. So the challenge that the Loxahatchee River needs, and whether you're dealing with the old Rock Pits project out off of Southern Boulevard out west, or these other projects, is we need more water storage in the system to be able to get water into the Loxahatchee River of good quality and at the right time. So what has led us to all these problems? Here's a picture from the University of Florida's archives from 1958. Look at all those wetlands. Every one of those dark patches is a wetland. So that's Bridge Road corridor. Bridge Road was built many years before that. But you can see that although the wetlands are there, essentially Bridge Road at that time had not caused that much of a problem in the area. But if you take a look at it now, even though we like to say that in comparison to most other areas, it's in a more natural state, you see that a lot of those wetlands have been ditched and drained. And so we're having challenges. That's what's causing the problems to the water quality in both the Loxahatchee and in the South Fork. So I said that Martin County has these strict wetland protection standards. How can we lose these hundreds or thousands of acres worth of wetlands? Well, through a couple of different things. Number one is it's Martin County's comprehensive growth management plan that protects those wetlands, and that was developed in the 1980s. So a lot of the wetlands that we lost were prior to that. The second thing is the agricultural industry overall has great latitude with exemptions for things that would otherwise not be allowed. And the Guardians, who I'm work for, the Guardians of Martin County, is dealing with one of those exemptions or preemptions. I don't know if you have seen the information recently about the slaughterhouse project. A slaughterhouse has been proposed on a 2,000-acre tract out in northwestern Martin County. And there, the agricultural exemption is so strong that the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services has alleged that Martin County has no oversight ability whatsoever. No building permits, no traffic analysis, nothing that would regulate this project. So that's what happened to a lot of these wetlands. They were ditched and drained legitimately under the agricultural exemptions. So let's talk a little bit about the beneficiaries of this project. All of you are conservationists for one reason or another, whether it's the birds or the wildlife or the plants or whatever it is. My note said I was going to warn you about this.
We'll just keep going and ask it at the end, see if they remember.
I'm going to skip over it quickly, but I'll tell you not the answer to my question, but some of the other statistics. And that is that We've got over 1,000 plants and animals within our focus area. And yes, that includes the scrub jays and things like that in Jonathan Dickinson State Park that might not be exactly in our Loxa-Lucie Headwaters area, but it's connected to it. What's going on in our watershed affects those. So over 1,000 plants and animals. We've got a population of over 200,000 people within 10 miles of our project area. So we know development pressure is very high. And overall, we've had some analysis done of what they call green infrastructure. Essentially, by protecting these wetlands, we don't have to build stormwater management areas and other things like that. So the statistic is 16.4 million gallons of water per year are flowing through this system. And so our goal is to try to make that water quality better so that when it gets downstream into those areas where people are recreating, paddleboards, kayaks, canoes, boating, fishing, whatever it is, that it is in a better condition. Let's see if this video will play. So you see the wood storks, roseate spoonbills, some of the great egret, white ibis in there. You'd think that might have been in the national park. It's right here in the swale along Bridge Road. And part of the reason that we have wood storks and others waiting in there is those of you who know about it know wood storks are protected under the state and federal regulations. And the wetlands within what the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service calls a core foraging area. This is the area that an adult wood stork will fly to get the prey to take back to their nest. So Fish and Wildlife Service has determined that here in South Florida, that's 18.6 miles. And so our project, which is there in the yellow oval, is about 7 miles from the more northerly wood stork colony up at Bird Island. And then to the south, for those of you there in Palm Beach County, you know about the wading bird colony at the Solid Waste Authority. So just to the west of where the actual incineration facility is. So these wetlands within that 18.6 miles are better protected by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers because at the federal level, those wetlands are acknowledged for being valuable to wood storks. So back to what we're trying to do. We've gone through this and tried to identify phase 1 acquisition projects, which generally need to meet all of those criteria on the right. They might not be in good quality right now, but they have to have restorable hydrology. That's what's going to happen overall to improve conditions in the Loxahatchee in the South Fork. The reason we got water quality problems right now is we get a drop of rain and it gets shunted out some ditch or culvert or something right to those rivers. By restoring that hydrologic regime, increasing the water table, that water has a chance to percolate down, recharge the surficial aquifer, and take some of those nutrients out before those waters get into the rivers. So restore natural flows, prevent flooding, which is one of our challenges. It's kind of hit or miss here. It's either too dry or too wet. But you may recall a few years ago, we had flooding problems here in Hobe Sound because the water system is overall highly managed, but it's not managed in a way that has taken natural areas into account. So that sort of green infrastructure is important. So we've got wells here in the Hobe Sound area, freshwater wells that have indeed gone saline, can't be used. It's because we have overdrained that surficial aquifer. I'm going to mention at the bottom here, reducing wildlife mortality. I've got a slide a little bit later on, but I'll just flag that for you. That's one of the things we're going to talk about. So I mentioned those phase one acquisitions. We looked at all of the for sale signs along the road here, and the first one that we acquired was this 138-acre tract on the north side of Bridge Road. It's 2 miles long. We felt that that was most vulnerable to some sort of development, and so that was the first one that we were able to acquire. The second one is on the south side of Bridge Road, a 20-acre parcel. And then the third one is one that those of you who want to go on a field trip after this will go to, is a 20-acre parcel. It doesn't front onto Bridge Road, but this one was important to us because it abuts Jonathan Dickinson. And so it is sort of a jigsaw puzzle of property ownership. It has to be for sale, and it has to be able to be within this corridor. So we think that is a strategic one for us to have acquired. And you see the information over on the right about when we started these fundraising campaigns, and we are very nearly at the end of meeting our target for acquisition number 3. So now we're looking at acquisition number 4. What property are we going to purchase next? So wildlife mortality. It's a challenge. Once we got into this, we didn't realize that what a problem Bridge Road is for wildlife. Once we started focusing on kind of the hydrology and where the culverts are underneath the road and all that, we were analyzing the properties, and unfortunately we see that Bridge Road is pretty bad for wildlife mortality. I saw one freshly dead raccoon as I drove in this morning. And it's not just raccoons. You see, when we were doing these surveys, we've got over 650 animals. There were 9 different species of mammals. So yes, not only raccoons, but bobcats and river otters and just a variety of things. Lots of different birds. So you see up there, wood stork, roseate spoonbill. And part of the challenge, you saw that other video with the wood storks feeding in the swale. There are swales on both sides of Bridge Road. And so while we have talked with this, with the county, and the Bridge Road is maintained by Martin County, about how to deal with this, they say they would put a fence along the edge of the right-of-way. But that's not really going to solve our problem because the swales are within the road right-of-way. And generally what's happening is those wading birds are flying from the shallow wetlands and the swales on one side over to the shallow swales on the other side of the road. So a fence at the property line isn't going to do anything like that. So we haven't cracked that nut yet, but we have talked with the county and the Water Management District and others. And what we would ultimately like to see is down there in my yellow box at the lower right is a wildlife crossing. It's going to cost millions of dollars to do. The county doesn't want to spend that kind of money for wildlife. And so, and large-scale modifications to Bridge Road aren't on the local road plan until 2035. So we'd like to get going with this before that. We have identified some grant opportunities that will hopefully let us put in a wildlife crossing. But for those of you who know about other local wildlife crossings, if you go out Indiantown Road west of 95, you don't even notice it, but there's a little rise there. So the Florida Trail goes under that wildlife crossing, and that's what my picture is on the right there. The way the wildlife crossings are designed is they have a deeper area for the alligators and otters and the fish and all that to swim through. There is an upland area adjacent to that for the land mammals and for people to go through. And for the Florida Trail, you have to get off your horse, but you can take your horse and go under Indiantown Road. Now, we're going to be able to do that here as part of our wildlife connection, our ecological corridor. Probably not, because the water table is so high along Bridge Road. But we know it's a problem. The county has concurred with us that something should be done. Their first attempt was just to put up those caution wildlife crossing signs to give people an idea of what's going on. But as you see from the bottom there, we kept GPS locations of every carcass that we found and recorded what species it was and which side of the road and all that sort of thing. And there is no easy solution. Every one of those colored dots that I've got color coded by mammals or birds or whatever it is some animal that bit the dust going across that road. So it's not like we can do one wildlife crossing and it's going to solve all the problems. But at least it's on people's radar screen that they know that all this is happening. So I mentioned water quality, observation platforms, that sort of thing, and hiking trails. We'd love to be able to get people to be able to hike or horseback ride from one state park to the other. Back to what we're doing on our properties, our first priority is to purchase them, get them off, take off the development rights, so nothing other is going to happen there. Then take off the invasive species is the next step in this, and we have been successful in getting a state grant for hundreds of thousands of dollars to help us remove those invasives. It's a cost match sort of thing, so people who are providing donations to us, your match is going towards that as well. And we do have some pretty severe problems on some of these properties. The Lygodium you see on the left is one of those species. Another one is the ear-leafed acacia. Anybody know that tree? It's a terrible one. I sat in on one of these webinars recently, and the invasive species people were saying that one mature ear-leafed acacia can produce 60,000 seeds in one blooming season. I mean, it's no wonder the plant is such a problem. So although we would prefer to not use chemicals, some of the plants you really need to. And so the picture up in the upper right is the process that we're using for most of those trees, the melaleuca and the ear-leafed acacia, what they call hack and squirt. You girdle the trunk, you put the poison in. It's not broadcast spraying of herbicide, but you're putting that poison right on the trunk, and it's killing the plant that way. So I've got the list of several of those invasives over on the right that are the worst on our properties. We're working on it. And that's the first step towards hydrologic restoration, because all those trees, they're sucking up water and through evapotranspiration, they're using that water. So once we get those invasives off, that's the first step. Future steps are going to be plugging up some of the culverts and putting in water control structures. So a little bit about our timeline here. We started back in 2019 with this idea, and it has been moving forward since then. Pandemic-wise, this was horrendous timing. We had to cancel our kickoff event because of the outbreak of the COVID pandemic. So instead, we've needed to do initially a lot more Zoom kinds of calls and that kind of advocacy. But you see there, we've been working steadily, making progress as we go. I'm going to move down to November 2024, which was a big step for those of you in Martin County who voted for the Martin County Forever referendum. And in that, we all voted to increase our sales tax, to buy lands in one of 4 different categories. First off was the Indian River Blueways. These are properties that are also on Florida Forever list, right along the Indian River Lagoon. The next is the SERP footprint. So there are a lot of properties there, that some of which include the westerly part of our Headwaters area. The third, and this was one of the catalysts, I think, for the Martin County Forever program, was the frustration that those of you who have been supporting the Loxa-Lucie have felt that we can raise a couple $1 million, but we cannot raise hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's what this project will do. And then the fourth area is Palmar. And that's another wetland area that we share with Palm Beach County, a vast area of wetlands out in the western part of the county. So as going through this, we have methodically listened to what the state told us that we need to get local support. And so you see on the left those governmental entities that have supported us through ordinances or resolutions, whatever it would be for each governmental entity. And we're pleased that every local government in our area has indeed endorsed the project. The middle column there, other water quality advocates, and this is why I'm so appreciative of Maria asking me to present to the Sierra Club, because we don't have you on this list yet. Okay. But other environmental groups certainly have. You see there, the Rivers Coalition, and their 106, I think, different organizations, Audubon the Everglades, the local Audubon chapter here, Native Plant Society, and then over on the right, just other groups that may not have an environmental focus at all, but homeowners associations, garden clubs, other areas like that. So we appreciate that support. So what can you all do? Very definitely. A letter of endorsement won't cost you all anything, but if this is something that you would support, we would love to have that endorsement. We're also still doing environmental analyses on these properties. And so I participated in the Christmas bird count for Jonathan Dickinson. The portion of that includes our Loxa-Lucie properties. So helping us out with those surveys will also help. And then indeed, the way we have gotten to the several $1 million that we have been able to raise so far has been the result of hundreds of donations, everywhere from $10 on up. And all of those are helpful as we go back to the state and try to tell them that, yes, the local community does support it. So I haven't mentioned that the consortium of who we are that are working on this is the Guardians of Martin County, nonprofit conservation group based here in Hope Sound. The Treasured Lands Foundation is the local land trust for this area. And over on this side is Jim Karras with the Treasured Lands Foundation. And they are working on acquiring those small parcels of property that the owner wants them to be in conservation, but for whatever reason, the owner doesn't want to sell them or can't sell them or donate them to the county or the state park system or whatever it would be. And then the third entity here is kind of the key entity for the actual land acquisition and land management process, and that is the Conservation Fund. They're a nationwide conservation organization with many years of experience in how to deal with land acquisition. You know, the Guardians, we don't know much about that, but the Conservation Fund does, and they know about conservation easements and that sort of thing. So they are, even though all of these entities are 501c3 nonprofits, they are the ones that are accepting the large donations, well, small ones as well, but the larger donations to that tax deductible that go towards the actual acquisitions of the properties. So with that, we will talk about the field trip in a little bit, but I'll stop here for a minute just to take any questions that people might have. Well, first hand I saw was Drew Martin. What you got?
So on the endorsement, if you send us a copy of that and with the blanks, we'll fill it in and do it.
I can certainly do that. We do also have a Loxa-Lucie Headwaters website, and I've got copies of those letters of support from the others, but I'll pick out a few of the more recent and send them to you as sort of templates. And
Okay.
yes, we would certainly appreciate that.
Great. On your thank you list, you've mentioned some of the advisors, and we're graced by the presence of Jeffrey Smith, internationally known artist, who has been a donor. And I don't know if you're going to get your feet wet today, possibly, but we're grateful for your donations to the various organizations.
Very definitely. Jeffrey did a piece of art last month for Sandhill Cranes that was used in an auction that we had for an outreach event that the Guardians, the Loxa-Lucie had recently. Okay, any other questions? Yes.
On the list of invasive, you have wild hogs. Are you talking about the animal wild hogs, or is there a plant called wild hogs?
Definitely, and I had them up there at the top of the list because, yes, it is the mammal, the wild hog. not native to around here, and I had them at the top of the list because even though the native plants are causing problems, wild hogs are a challenge to get rid of. And they are horrendously damaging to the natural environment. So we were out flagging wetlands recently, and we would come across an area hundreds of square feet in size where the hogs have just come in and rooted things up. So they're damaging the plant communities, and so we are trying to get rid of them off of our properties. Other questions? Yes.
This might be not valid, but when you were talking about purchasing land where the owner was interested in selling it to us, but for some reason couldn't actually sell it, could he not do like 100-year lease as a stopgap until it could be purchased?
Right. The question for those of you who might not have heard is, would an owner possibly consider a 100-year lease or some kind of a long-term arrangement rather than selling? And yes, that's why we're pleased with the Conservation Fund, because they know about all those kinds of things. Whether it is a conservation easement that would have certain restrictions on it, and this is where, if you've read about the Rural and Family Lands program at the state, what they're trying to do is, because they're not funding Florida Forever acquisitions, they are funding these kinds of conservation easements where the property owner will be allowed to continue whatever it is that they're doing, cattle ranching, cattle pasture land, whatever it is, but the terms of those easements are to buy the development rights off of it. So yes, that is one of the options that we're looking at. Maria?
So did you say that you were not going to be able to build a wildlife corridor under Bridge Road?
We would like to.
Yeah. But
It probably will not be big enough for people to walk through, but what we want it to, at the minimum, be able to do is allow both the aquatic and the land animals to get through it. And those very definitely work. One of the ones that we might be taking the design plans as the concept for what we're doing is, some of you may recall a few years ago that there was a Florida panther killed out here on the Beeline Highway. That was after they had done some modifications to the Beeline. You know, it's now a 4-lane highway, and they put in a wildlife crossing that's not big enough for a person to walk through, but it's big enough for those kind of animals to go through. And that's what we're hoping that Martin County will do in this sort of a situation. They put up wildlife cameras on those, and I don't know who gets the job of watching what goes through, but whoever is monitoring the one on the Beeline, they probably saw a raccoon, otter, bobcat or something, and then one day they saw me, because I went crawling through it just to see what the situation was. But that's the kind of the magnitude that we would hope could be done here. And Martin County has it on their radar screen. I think they're going to be relying on us to get the grant that would allow for that. You know, they're going to likely fund the project that will take out the curve of Bridge Road or other things like that. But we don't think unto themselves they're going to find $1 million or something like that for a wildlife crossing. So it's a big challenge for us. Yes?
Oh, what depth does the aquifer run, basically bringing the water through Martin County?
Right. It certainly varies in different parts of the county. Under the Pine Flatlands, there's this area, a geologic feature called hardpan, and generally that goes anywhere from about 20 feet below the ground surface to more like 100 feet. I don't know what the maximum is, but a controversial growth management situation that we were just dealing with here was developers have come into Martin County asking to be allowed to dredge deeper than what the current restriction has allowed. And our concerns about that are, indeed, once you pierce that hard pan layer that is otherwise kind of protecting the aquifer, you've got
It also
challenges.
filters.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that should be totally revolving.
Yeah. Yeah, for a long time, Martin County's maximum dredge depth was to 20 feet, and now they have gotten okay in certain instances to go to 40 feet. Yeah.
That's great. One other quick one. What about does the road interfere, or a road such as Bridge Road, does that interfere with the water flow?
It does, and I'd be glad to talk with you afterwards. I've got a slide back here later on that show that there are over a dozen culverts going under Bridge Road. And so those are kind of like soda straws to let the water flow back and forth one way or another. Most people know that in Florida, we get a rainstorm and it might rain on one side of the road, not the other. Well, the flow in this area is it's kind of odd. I know it's been manipulated by the agricultural operations, but yes, that's one of the things that we need to deal with.
Yeah, so you're talking about the hogs now. If you had some panthers in here, would they eat the hogs? Are there other natural predators that might eat hogs?
Panthers would, but as most of you know, the majority of the Florida panthers are over on the southwest part of the state. They are somewhat expanding their range, looking for habitat, and one was killed here in Martin County just a couple of years ago on the roadside. But ever having enough of a population of panthers to do damage for hogs, it's not going to happen. And just lastly, the other thing on the front table here, I mentioned that the nonprofit that I'm working for is the Guardians of Martin County. We've got copies of our most recent newsletter up here on the front table. Tells a little bit about us and growth management things, and then there are flyers for the Loxa-Lucie as well. So thank you all for your attention. Good to see so many people on a nice spring morning. And the question was, how many threatened and endangered species are there within the Loxa-Lucie area? Let's see a couple hands, and I'll call on people till we get real close. 1,000. Wow. No, threatened and endangered. So nowhere near 1,000. We wish there were, but no. Let's go over here in the yellow shirt. Was the next 30? That's a pretty good guess, but we're going to go higher than that. How about back here? 45. That is very good. You got it. You got it.